This podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only. It is not medical advice. Please consult a qualified healthcare professional before making any health or lifestyle changes. Welcome to the Happy Healthy Her podcast, your go-to space for real talk, inspiration, and laughter as we navigate life as a woman. Let's dive in.
Welcome back to the Happy Healthy Her podcast, the space where the conversations are real so we can empower women to live their best lives in midlife and beyond. I'm your host today, Cynthia Penner. I'm a menopause health coach and author of the Menopause Map book series, and also host of a new Menopause Map Minute podcast and YouTube channel. It is my mission helping women understand their bodies, their patterns, and their stories so they can move forward with clarity in every season of life, especially menopause. I'm joined today by my dear friends and co-hosts, Tracy Mail and Lorraine Keim. Welcome, Tracy. Please introduce yourself.
Thank you very much. Oh, so formal, so nice. Okay. Hi, I'm Tracy Mail. I am a health empowerment coach. If you're not quite feeling like yourself lately, I work with women navigating everything from exhaustion to Hashimoto's using simple holistic lifestyle tweaks to help them feel like themselves again. I need to stop my notification. Sorry. Go ahead.
And welcome, Lorraine. Please introduce yourself.
Of course. Hello, I am Lorraine Keim. I'm a mindset wellness coach, empowering women to live more authentically through my customized guided system of self-discovery and self-healing. Welcome, everyone.
Welcome. So today's conversation is one that I believe every woman can relate to, whether she realizes it yet or not. We're talking about food, but not in the way most conversations do. This is not about diets, rules, or willpower. It's about the invisible stories we carry around eating, bodies, and worth. Our guest today is Jessica Setnick. Jessica is a registered dietitian who began her career working with children with eating disorders. Over time, she realized the tools she was using in that space applied far beyond that setting. They apply to anyone who eats, which is all of us. So Jessica is the creator of Healing Your Inner Eater, a workshop and workbook that explores the historical and intergenerational patterns shaping how we think about food and our bodies, often without us even realizing it. Jessica, so glad you're here. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here. And I totally was relating to everything you were saying each in your introductions because I'm totally in that same age space of life. So I'm here for it.
Nice.
Awesome. So Jessica, to help our listeners really understand the heart behind your work, I'd love to start at the beginning. Can you share who you are, what you do today, and the journey that led you from working with children with eating disorders to creating Healing Your Inner Eater?
Sure. How much time do you have?
Oh.
Just kidding. Where I am today is I no longer see patients individually. I'm a speaker and an advocate. And so I have two halves to my life. One is my work, which is giving presentations and trainings to health professionals to help them do a better job helping individuals with eating problems in their practice, in their hospital, wherever they work. And the other half is fighting with insurance companies to make sure that they cover eating disorder care appropriately. And I do that as a volunteer, which the irony is not lost on me that when I had a practice, I hated dealing with insurance companies for money. And now I do it for fun and for free. But I'm really good at it because I have the knowledge base and I don't see patients. So they can call me back at 3:00 in the afternoon and I'm available to take their calls. So basically I'm a Karen who never goes away. So those are the two sort of places that I spend my time now. Back when I started, my first job was in a children's hospital here in Dallas. They were just starting up an eating disorder program for children. And as it got going, it was the only place in all of North Texas, which is a pretty big space and a pretty big population, where someone who was under 18 could get treatment for an eating disorder. And so the program grew enormous as soon as it started, basically. And 2 years in, I was overwhelmed and felt like this is not sustainable as one person's job. So I asked my boss, what do I do? You have to help me prioritize. And my boss said the least acute patients, send them out into the community. Well, there was no one in the community for them to see. So I decided to be that source or resource in the community for children who didn't need to be in the hospital. I started a private practice. And so that then, again, because there just wasn't that much, this is 1998, I'm older than I look. So this is a long time ago. There just weren't a lot of resources. So that practice grew and grew, and I expanded to adults. There was no reason to stick with kids because the way I think of it is every adult with an eating disorder was probably a kid with an eating disorder that just wasn't detected, identified, or treated. So that became my practice. And then in 2003, this was also the dawn of the internet, which probably makes me sound like I'm 1,000 years old, but it was the beginning. Oh, you get it? You're with me?
We're all there. We're all there.
We're getting it. Okay. Yes.
Right. So it was the beginning of people reaching out to other people on the internet in chat rooms for help. And I started doing a lot of offering other dietitians advice because we don't get any training on eating disorders in school. So I was answering a lot of people's questions. And through that, people who were planning events and conferences started asking me to speak. I ended up teaching my own workshop called Eating Disorders Boot Camp. And then over time, I moved much more into speaking, and I worked as a spokesperson for several eating disorder programs and moved away from that individual practice because the way I felt was we don't know very much about eating disorders, big picture. Like we don't know what causes eating disorders. We don't know what cures eating disorders. We can't prevent every eating disorder, but we know enough that we could be doing a much better job. And so everything I learned in my 15 years of seeing patients, I took and flipped it around and went to how can we teach the professionals some of this stuff so that they can catch it much sooner before anyone has to get to a specialist. So that's how I made the flip from patient care into being a speaker. And then the PS to that is one of my eating disorder spokesperson jobs, I was asked to do a 5-day workshop for individuals who had already gone through the addiction program at this facility. They wanted, for people who are still struggling with their eating, they wanted an additional 5-day workshop where they came and spent the night and did that with me. And I basically used all the skills that I already taught to people with eating disorders. Just because these individuals didn't come in with a diagnosis of an eating disorder or a stamp that says I have an eating disorder, they were eaters. They had problems that originated in childhood. And so based on that, that's where it had a different name at that time, but that's what Healing Your Inner Eater came from, is this realization that you shouldn't have to get an eating disorder and get diagnosed with an eating disorder and have to find treatment for an eating disorder to learn some of this stuff. It really should be accessible to anyone.
I agree 1,000%. It drives me nuts that I don't have a diagnosis or I didn't, it doesn't matter what it is. Eating disorder, Hashimoto's, thyroid issues.
Well, thyroid.
Yes. And let me also add, because there's so much more I could say, but I'm just really trying to be concise, which is hard for me with adult onset or adult diagnosed ADHD. But I was told by a speaking coach that I should take the words eating disorders out of my talks. And I was like, you just ripped out my identity and stomped on it. Like I am known throughout the nation as an eating disorder expert. What are you talking about? And she said, I listened to all your talks and everything you said applies to me. And so I actually had to hear it from an outside person to really hit it home, because that idea that we all are eaters and we all have dysfunctional behaviors, it's just on a spectrum. And only when it gets really, really severe does it actually get the name of eating disorder. So I've just stopped talking about eating disorders, and I just call it dysfunctional eating behaviors, disruptive eating behaviors, problem eating behaviors, eating struggles. Because when you say eating disorders, I feel like most people have this avatar in their mind of what that looks like, and everyone else is eliminated. Exactly. And if we talk about problem eating behaviors, suddenly that opens the door to everyone.
Yeah. People haven't been diagnosed. They don't recognize themselves in what you're saying. Like, oh, I haven't been diagnosed. That doesn't apply to me. It's like, yeah, it does. Catch it before it gets to that point. And then you have
and are you always happy about what you eat? And do you always choose the most nutritious foods? And do you always walk away feeling satisfied? I mean, none of us can answer yes to all of those things. We all have disruptive eating behaviors. It's just a matter of scale. Every once in a while, who cares? But if it's impairing either your health or your functioning or your ability to have basically mind space to do other things, if your regret about eating is so dramatic and pervasive that it's impairing your ability to have a balanced life, that's enough of a reason to get help or to try to even do self-help, as opposed to saying, I don't really have a problem. Some people have bigger problems than me. That's not what it's about. It's not a competition to see who could be the best mental patient.
Yeah. Is how you work expanded once you realize these struggles aren't rare or extreme, they're human, right? You saw that what you were teaching children could actually help anyone who eats, which most
Yes.
people never think they're allowed to need help unless things feel severe. So
Yes.
I was going to ask, like, what was that fringe issue? Like, what was it that got your attention? And you were just saying it was that lady. And during what you were just saying, you said you recently got diagnosed with late onset ADHD. I have a couple of boys that have it. When it was explained to me, they were called, instead of learning disability, right? Learning differences. And for that lady that was talking to you, once you took out the word disorder, right?
Yeah.
It involved everyone. So it's a difference, right? Everybody eats, but you're right, not a disorder, it's a difference. So
Yes. There was another kind of like thumbtack that I can point to that was a turning point for me. And that was when I was on a speakers bureau for speakers who speak at college campuses. And they had several speakers that spoke about alcohol problems. And in my mind, the defining line or dividing line between an alcohol problem and not an alcohol problem is something like quantitative. How many drinks do you have? Do you drink in the morning? Do you drink every day? Like it was something that you could point to very specifically. And what I learned from them is really that is passe thinking. And that now the current thinking is an alcohol problem is basically defined by, do problems happen when you drink or when you don't drink? And that opened my mind so much because I thought, let's just apply that to eating. Do problems happen when you eat or when you don't eat? That is a question everyone can answer. It's not about how
yeah,
much you eat, how much you don't eat, how often you eat, which food you eat, which food you don't eat, how many foods you don't eat. It's literally, is it a functional problem for you? Because I may sit and eat carrots for lunch, let's just say, because I just found this new brand of carrots and carrots are delicious and I love them so much. And you might eat carrots for lunch because you're scared to eat anything that has more than a few calories, right? And it's two totally
yeah,
different motivations, but we're eating the same thing. So to an outside person, you cannot look at what someone is eating and say, this is a plus or this is a minus, this is a positive, this is a negative. You really have to understand the motivation. And that's what I got from my work with children is that you really have to ask why someone is doing something because kids are so concrete, right? They think something like fat makes you fat, like peas
Yeah.
make you pee. Like it just makes sense to them, right?
So
Or
cute.
a child told me that they decided to eat in a vegan manner because they wanted to be kind to the animals. I said, "What about the leather jacket you're wearing?" And she said,
Mm.
"Well, no, they kill the cows for the meat. They just use the leather that's left over." Right? Like stuff like that. Oh, I can't even tell you how many kids I had to explain that if you leave your eggs in the refrigerator for a month, for a year, they are never going to turn into a chicken. Like kids think really concretely. And then I realized I'm explaining the same stuff to adults. The very same stuff. Because where
yeah.
did they get that information? If nobody told you when you were a kid that an egg's
Yeah.
never going to turn into a chicken, then you grow up into an adult thinking the exact same thing. So that's where to me it all really it's just a continuum as opposed to these very separate sort of boxes that we tend to want to put people in.
Yes. Awesome.
Oh, true. Oh, what can get tricky about this though is that a lot of and I'm going to narrow it to women.
Okay.
Obviously, it applies to everyone else, but we don't seem to be aware that it's a pattern. So they're living inside of this pattern that they're completely unaware of. They have no
Yeah.
clue how it originated. So, how do you help women gently step back and see that their relationship with food without self criticism or feeling like they need to change it right away? What is that like process that you
Yes.
help them see
It's
that
very simple.
something's going
It's
on.
very simple. We don't
Yeah.
ask, in Healing Your Inner Eater, we don't ask, what are your problem behaviors?
Right.
We don't go at it from the front door. We go at it from the back door. Something like, what were the experiences of the people who raised you? So we start with a circle and then circles around it. In each circle around put me in the middle circle. In each of those other circles, put an adult that was influential in your life before the age of 10. So it could be parents, could be foster parents, adoptive parents, bio parents, could be grandparents, could be your favorite aunt, could be a school teacher. Who were the influential people in your life? So we're not even saying at first who was influential in your eating, because already you start to sift it down, right? So we're just saying put all comers on the board. And then we don't even say what were their eating patterns like. We're because that's where people start to, like you said, start to try to differentiate. We just say, who were the people, adults that were influential in your childhood? And then we say, what were their experiences? What sticks out in your mind about them? And we ask people, this is just an exercise people do at the workshop, start writing a few memories of each person. And then we ask, after everyone spent a little bit of time on that, to discuss it with your table. What popped up while you were doing that might relate to something about food? So we don't start with food, we start with you, and then we look for the links to food. And so people will say things like, I'm just thinking of the last workshop I did. It was actually for professionals. So here is a professional person who has never pieced this together, a professional eating disorder treater, who said, what I realized when we were doing that is that my parents grew up poor, which is a very common thing that we hear. It just affects people in different ways. And my dad became very affluent. And in the 80s, when I was growing up, or 90s, the height of affluence was to be able to buy your kids those, oh my gosh, I'm blanking on the name, the little pack that has like the little meat, the little crackers. It's like a plastic.
Oh, the Lunchable things?
Lunchable.
Lunchables?
Thank you. Yes, Lunchable. She said the height of wealth was Lunchables, right? And so they gave me Lunchables for lunch every day, because it was like, wow, we can afford to give this to our child. She said, I was in college before I learned how to use a can opener. I was in college before I learned how to grill a chicken breast. Because, so in other words, her parents had sort of disabled her. I don't know if that's quite the right word, but she didn't have any skills for actually nourishing herself with food that you would buy at the farmer's market, because they thought they were doing her this wonderful gift, or giving her this wonderful gift by giving her these, special, expensive Lunchables, right? Other people say all kinds of different things, that you ask someone directly about their eating and it's like a deer in the headlights, right? There's shame and there's all kinds of sort of egocentric kind of pieces of our brains that come into play. But you just ask someone about their childhood and then the people that they were surrounded by in childhood, and then ask if any of those things could relate to eating. And here's a perfect example. I had a patient a long time ago, an adult patient, and about 6 visits in, she said to me, do you think the fact that my dad weighed me every day naked until I turned 18 and left home might be part of my eating disorder?
Yeah.
And of course, inside me, I'm thinking, like, that's the whole thing right there. How could you not have thought of this till 6 weeks in? I mean, that's what I'm thinking in my head. But later, when I thought it through, I thought, this is exactly what we're talking about. We are so defended against the things that have affected us because of defense mechanism. Either she minimized it because to recognize what horrible trauma she had experienced would be so painful that during that time she had to just smush it into like, this is just what happens when you're a kid, or this is just what dads do, or whatever it was that she had to sort of protect from. She had a therapist for a long time, had never told her therapist, because a therapist is asking other things. And so she's just answering those questions, right? No one's ever going to say, did your dad weigh you naked when you were a kid? Like, nobody asks that. So there's no reason that you would answer that question, right? So in other words, it was like this another eye-opening moment of thinking we have to get to things through the back door, because through the front door, we are so emotionally protected and defended from some of this stuff, because we've either just completely normalized it in our minds or minimized it, or in some cases kind of forgot about it.
Absolutely.
So did that answer your question? That was a long answer to a short question, but that's how we get started
Yeah.
trying to see where some of these patterns are. And once people start to understand this is the kind of pattern we're looking for, it doesn't have to be anything that affected any other human on the planet. We are not looking for themes and trends. We are looking for the individual things that happened to you, that were said to you, that were demonstrated to you, plus how you interpreted them. Because you could have a sibling in the same family who remembers an incident completely differently.
Oh,
Or
absolutely.
who internalized an experience completely differently. Same parents, same situation, right? And it's just completely different. Whether you're different genders or whether you're different ages or whether you're identical twins, doesn't matter. You still experience things differently. And so we're really trying to help people break apart anything that they identify as eating disorders and instead look at where are you compared to where you wish you were. And P.S., some of the things that people do with their food are not causing problems and you don't have to change. And it's just interesting and informative to see where they came from. I'm thinking of another participant in a different workshop who said, I always have to have something hot and cold on the table because my mom always had something hot and cold on the table. And my kids think I'm nuts because when we order in a pizza, I always put pickles on the table because I want to have something cold and they think it's weird. And I'm like, I don't know. I just need to. And my question to her is, what if you went to someone else's house and they ordered you a pizza? Could you just survive? Like, what? She's like, no, I don't care what other people do, right? It's just, so it's not impairing her ability to eat. It's not impairing her ability to socialize, right? It's just something that she does. Does she have to stop it? No, she doesn't. But if it were causing problems, if she was spending her baby diaper money on pickles, right? That's when we have to look at it and say,
Right.
is this something that you're carrying on for whatever reason from an ancestor, from an experience that maybe doesn't have a place in your life anymore? And how can we honor that experience or that ancestor without having to actually buy millions of jars of pickles that nobody's eating, for example?
One of the things
Wow,
that make
that's
your work
incredible.
so compelling is it doesn't just look at what we eat, but why we eat the way we do, right? So I'd
Yes.
love for you to walk us into that deeper layer. So what makes healing your inner eater different?
Different than what?
What everyone else is when you're talking about eating disorders, when we're
Oh,
talking
yeah.
about diets, or
Yeah.
we're talking
Because we
about
never ask anyone, what is your typical day like? What do you eat in a day? How many calories do you eat? How many macros do you eat? Do you take a multivitamin? Because we're really trying to help someone unlayer their true self, because only when you find that true self can you even decide what you want to be eating and should you be taking a multivitamin. Like, you don't even know the answer to that yet because all of that stuff is so, how can I say this? Humans have been eating without knowing how many calories were in their food for a long, long time. And our
Yes.
brains have really not evolved to deal with that information. We don't know what to do with it. Kind of on a body image side, we think of it like our brains did not evolve to be able to see our own image. There were not mirrors for most of human history. There were definitely not cameras, and there were definitely not selfies. So for a lot of human history, the only way you could even catch a glimpse of what you looked like was in like a puddle that you walked by, okay, or a pond. And that was not a direct correlation, right? So our brains did not evolve to deal with all of this nutrition information. Food is a survival instinct. And so whatever ideas you have of like, I'm going to only eat X many calories a day, that is a totally different part of your brain making that decision from the part of you that's deciding what to eat in the moment or how to survive, basically. So what we're trying to say is until you get this survival stuff sort of understood, not necessarily changed, but understood, then anything that your sort of egocentric brain decides for you is not going to stick. The part of you that says, I'm going to run 5 miles every day, or I'm going to whatever, not eat any more sugar. I don't know if that's the right or wrong choice for you. I don't know what you eat and what your background is and what your health history is. And we could talk about that. I am a dietitian, but it doesn't even matter what we decide, because if there's underlying parts of you that, for example, connect with a dead parent through chocolate because that dead parent always bought you chocolate when they came home from business trips, it doesn't matter what the egocentric part of you says, I'm going to stop eating sugar. Whenever you want to connect with that passed away parent, you're going to the chocolate. And so we have to identify that before you make a conscious decision. Otherwise, it's not your consciousness that's making a lot of these choices.
Wow.
Very interesting. I like that. Yeah. Never thought
And
of
that
it
was
that
an
way,
actual
right?
example
Yeah,
from
okay.
Yeah.
a
No,
patient
you can
who was
absolutely see
binging
that.
on chocolates
Yeah.
because that was something that she connected with her dad. And so the
Yeah.
question is not, why can't I stop eating chocolate, or how do I stop eating chocolate? The question is, how do you connect with your dad who's passed away in a different way? If eating
Right.
chocolate is not functional, helpful, safe, whatever word you want to use for you, it's not what you want to be doing. Because if you want to eat chocolate as a way of connecting with your dad, I am not here to tell you not to do it. But if you think that is not ideal, then how can you connect with your dad? And hey, I'm a dietitian. It might be a therapist or a minister or a best friend that you figure that out with. It might not be me, but I can tell you that eating chocolate, if that's the only way for you to connect with your dad, you're not going to stop doing it just because your doctor says you need to lose weight or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah,
Right. Yeah.
exactly.
Wow. I love that we're talking about this. We had a past episode called The Stories That We Carry. And so I love that we're talking about stories, because basically that's what our memories are, our past, our events. And so we have these stories about our food, about our bodies. And some of us don't even realize they are stories. And our perceptions, I love that you said that earlier. Our perceptions about these stories are another layer that we're talking about here. So we end up saying, well, this is just how we are. Like it's not connected to our past or how we grew up or any of our, memories. So when that realization does land, that belief might not even be ours. Like we didn't choose it at some point. And so how does that realization shift when you see it as it relates to food or,
Yeah.
the
So in
process you're
healing
trying
your
to go
inner eater, we call those fairy tales, food fairy tales and body fairy tales. It used to
right.
be called food fairy tales, change the stories you tell about eating and live happily ever after. I changed the name at some point, but the food fairy tales and body fairy tales still sticks because the idea of it is a story, and I love that you used that word. A story can feel like something you wrote, but for some reason, the word fairy tale gives it that layer of like, this is a cultural thing, or this is something that was told to me. We didn't invent it, it was told to us, and we interpreted it maybe, or we,
Mm.
clamped onto it, but it didn't originate with us. And so that's how we try to sort of just verbally change it from this is my belief to this is the fairy tale that is guiding my actions. And then it's more of an external force. And you can choose to continue to do it, but you're aware that you're choosing it. And I'm thinking of several people in the workshop have said things like, I always have to have a beverage with me for lots of different reasons from their past. And if it's not hurting you, have a beverage with you all the time. That's fine. But now they know where that came from, and so let's say there's a family member that's like, why do I always have to have a beverage? They can say, it has to do with my past and it's a choice I'm making. And if you want to know the whole story, I'll tell you, instead of feeling ashamed of it,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
Or thinking I should change it, or thinking this person's not understanding because I don't really understand it myself. So it's that kind of thing. It's like, if you want to believe in the fairy tale, that's okay. Or if you want to say, I don't really believe it, but I kind of like it. Like, I kind of like Disney princesses. They get a lot of flack, but Disney princesses are like really kind to animals and like they have a lot of good qualities, right?
Yep.
So you don't have to believe in the whole fairy tale lock, stock, and barrel. You can choose the parts that make sense in your life now and let go of the whole like the prince is going to rescue me and save the day if you don't believe in that anymore.
Yeah.
I love you. Okay.
Yeah, I do love that, because making that distinction really is helpful for your mindset from this is my story that I wrote to this is a fairy tale or a folklore or tradition or just, a pattern I developed. So that when you give that space between your behavior and the pattern, then you can reinterpret it even if that means keeping it, but
Yes.
giving
You
it a different
totally get me.
name.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
You know, so
Yes.
that's wonderful, because that's all any of us are really trying to do here when we're coaching, is we're not trying to criticize. There's no judgment. We don't want people feeling bad about themselves, shame, guilt, or any of that. We want awareness and reflection and acceptance, and even accountability and responsibility without the negative aspects of that.
Yes.
So the story you
Try
want
being a
to adopt.
dietitian, walking into a meal with someone and them saying, "What do you do for a living?" I mean, they immediately think you're going to count the calories in their food and give them like a list of everything they're doing wrong. Yeah, yes, maybe I should just call myself a coach now, because you're right. That's such a nicer way of approaching things. Yes.
That's so true.
That's great.
Yes, because shame is not an effective behavior change method. I can tell you that
No.
for sure. Yeah.
No,
That's for sure.
No.
make it worse
So-
for sure.
Oh, absolutely. So as you're talking, Jessica, I keep thinking about midlife women who feel frustrated because they know what they should do, yet they feel stuck doing the same things. So what I hear you're saying is that many of these paths were laid out long before we had awareness or choice, right? So that understanding helps shift women out of self-blame and into awareness. And so that is exactly what you're doing, correct?
Oh, yeah. And let me tell you, I'm 53, I am in menopause. I had a hysterectomy, so I had no I had no
Oh.
flow to tell me that I was going into perimenopause and menopause. So it was kind of me noticing things about my body and telling my doctor that I am in perimenopause, right? So it's just a whole big mess, isn't it? With everything I know about body image and the fiction of body image and the perception and nutrition, I am still sitting here telling you it is hard to know that I have gained weight doing nothing different. It is hard to have my clothes not fit. It is a very challenging time of life. And I already know all this stuff. So
Me
I
too.
can't even imagine how hard it is for someone who's still believing this is all my fault. I've done something wrong. I'm failing in my duty as a woman, as a wife, to keep my figure. I'm using finger quotes if you can't see me. Like, all this stuff is like, oh my gosh, I don't know how anyone's making it through, because it is really hard. And if I didn't have my eating disorder colleague friends that I could say, like, I'm just going to wear a muumuu until my weight settles down, and they know I'm not criticizing my body, like, it is what it is. But like, it hurts my feelings to try my clothes on and they don't zip. So I'm just not doing it anymore. Hello, Hill House and one size fits all dresses, you know?
It's a new learning curve, Jessica. Menopause, it is a complete new learning curve. Everything that you've known up until menopause, now you get to learn something new. So I hope you are a lifelong learner, because once you learn the ins and outs of hormones, cortisol, testosterone, progesterone, and you master that, your coaching, is that what we're going to call it now? Whole new level, because every single woman on this planet is going through menopause. It's happening no matter what. So
can I tell you something? This is not exactly on our topic, but I think our listeners will be okay with it. One of my speaker coaching clients is a psychiatrist who specializes in women's reproductive health and mental health. And helping her with a presentation, I learned at 53 years old how your menstrual cycle works. I'm like thinking, I lived this for however 35 years, and yet I'm 53. And I'm like, oh, wait, I thought the beginning of the cycle was when you have your period. That's actually the end of this. Oh my God. And I was like, wow, this is ridiculous that we have made it. And she goes, this is what she said to make me feel better in theory. She goes, don't worry, most doctors don't know that either.
No.
I was like, that is not making me feel better.
no, we're Gen X. Our moms never taught us, right? My mom gave me a book. So it's our generation. It's just all that information skipped a little bit. But yeah.
Nobody knew. Nobody knows.
No.
Nobody. My mom talked about everything. And like, nobody knows. Like you say, doctors don't know. So how are we supposed to know? right? Menopause is just this crazy mythical thing
Yes,
that
I
we know
totally
we're
appreciate that camaraderie. Thank you.
right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I
Yes.
just went out. Everything you just said, I'm living it myself. I've started gaining weight. Like I've always been fit and active and I had the silly Hashimoto's hypothyroid postmenopause all hit at the same time. And
Oh.
all of a sudden I started gaining weight. I'm like, I'm not doing anything different. What is going on? And trying to put clothes on is depressing when everything fit. My bras didn't fit. Everything dug in. My underwear dug in. Oh, I went out last weekend and I bought a whole new wardrobe of clothing. I was
Good
going
for
to a
you.
couple things.
Yeah.
I feel fantastic. See, new shirt, everything fits, it's comfortable, and I feel good.
You know
Like,
what? I said that to my
yeah,
husband last week in
yeah,
Mexico. I said, what's interesting here is I'm not having a bad body image because I only brought things to Mexico that I know fit me. But I got a whole closet at home. And when I go in there to look for something, it makes me feel bad. It
it
makes me feel
does.
very, very bad because
Yeah.
there's this belief I have, fairy tale, that somehow this weight gain is going to go away and I'm going to be my old weight again and those clothes will fit again. And I need to let go of that and I need to not have those clothes facing me. I mean, if I have to keep them, if I really can't part with them, they're going in the attic. Because
Yeah.
every time I go in the closet and see these clothes, they are mocking me. And what's
Yeah.
amazing is I've probably given 100,000 people that advice, right? Never once did I think I was going to be giving it to myself, but here I
Yeah.
am,
Yeah.
right? So it's so
Yeah.
ironic.
Yeah.
If we treated ourselves like our best friends, that might be the best thing we could do because we're so
Yeah.
kind to our best
Yeah.
friends. And yet
Yeah.
we're so judgmental and mean to ourselves.
Yeah.
Mm.
Absolutely. I
Well,
took
that's what
everything out of my closet. I took everything out, put it in the other room. It's
You're my
gone. I only
inspiration.
have the clothes. There you go.
I'll
Only
do
Well,
clothes
I
it.
that
can't
fit
afford
me.
to do that,
Yeah.
ladies, but
Oh, I went.
I'm still
Yeah.
hoping I can
I
get
did
it
not
back.
spend big money. I went to the cheapest store I could find. I didn't care, and everything is so comfortable. And then
Right.
you put your clothes on. It doesn't. You don't think about it when
Well,
you
and the
put stuff
beauty of
on. Yeah,
2026 is we're all looking right at you and we don't know what you're wearing below the waist.
no, right? I got nothing on. No,
Didn't that all happen during COVID when all the Zoom meetings started and they would,
Right.
yeah, I remember that. Oh my
yeah.
gosh.
Oh man.
Well,
Okay. Sorry.
I am actually going through the same thing, just like Tracy. And Tracy is actually helping me, both Tracy and Cynthia. I'm experiencing that right now. I'm postmenopausal, very late in my menopause. I'm 63, and I can't deal with it anymore either. I mean, just I'm so uncomfortable in my body, and I've been for what, 2 years now trying to get onto this diet that Tracy is not helping me with. So I also relate to you saying, I know all of this. We know all of this. We know the mindset. We know the behavior patterns. We know breaking habits. We know how to eat healthy and move right and all of that. And I am having difficulty. I had difficulty starting. I've had difficulty when I did start. I'm having difficulty wanting to go back into those patterns. They're very difficult to overcome. And so, yes, this is definitely not something, oh, just do this and you'll be fine. None of us are saying that.
May I
No.
may I
All
explain
going
why
through
you're
this.
having
Yes.
difficulty if I may project onto you?
Sure, sure.
It's because the time that we spend talking like this among women in a deep way is such a drop in the bucket compared to the time we spend out in the world of advertising messages, of
Yes.
social media, of fitness messages, if you want to call it that, wellness
Yeah.
culture, diet culture.
Mm,
And those messages have been coming to us for decades. So to
mm,
have one or five or 10 conversations like this is still nothing, nothing, nothing compared
mm,
to the amount of bombardment we have to spend money because we're not good enough. And
Mhm.
that is really what it boils down to. Unfortunately, it's not a conspiracy exactly. It's more just how our culture is set up.
Mhm.
Is
Mhm.
that remember in the beginning of COVID, I feel like there was something about jeans, like jean sales went way down because legging sales went way up. Something like that.
Oh,
Like
that's
the
funny.
fact that people didn't have to be seen below the waist made a huge change in the way people were consumers. And it's the same thing. If you don't care about having frizzy hair, then you're not going to buy all the products to manage your hair. And if you don't care about having hairy armpits, then you're not going to buy razors and deodorant and all that stuff, right? So there's a vested interest in keeping us unhappy, and so with our bodies. And so I think that's what we're up against. It's not just a coincidence. And I think that is one of the big things that we try to emphasize in Healing Your Inner Eater too, is that you wake up every morning thinking that you are making independent choices about what to eat, what to do, what to wear. And it's sort of like, if you remember that scene in Devil Wears Prada where Meryl Streep tells Anne Hathaway, like, you think you picked that blue sweater, but really here's all the reasons that sweater was basically picked for you. I mean, you think you decided, what am I going to eat this morning? Will I have a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, or will I have a cup of coffee for breakfast? But really, what you have in the house is based on what is available in your area, is based on what grew this season, is based on what you could afford, is based on what your culture tells you is food versus not food. Like, you don't have grasshoppers in your fridge because in our culture, grasshopper isn't food, but in some cultures, grasshoppers are food, right? It's all of these things that are these huge systemic sort of impacts on us. And yet we wake up every morning thinking, I'm making my own choice. I'm making my own choice about what to wear. I'm making my own choice about what to eat. And so we try to just help people see the bigger picture of where all this stuff is coming in from. Again, so that you can make a choice, but an educated choice, knowing if I really wanted to eat grasshoppers for breakfast, I'm going to have to go to a very extra special length to do that, because that is not what is sort of not literally fed to me by my culture. And it's very interesting to start thinking about that. And then people start thinking about their grandparents who are indigenous or who were immigrants or whatever, and all the things that, and maybe they want to connect with some of those foods, and how people were, and a lot of times people were shamed into not eating their cultural foods or not bringing their cultural foods to school because they had a certain aroma. Like, there's so many reasons why people want to connect with their past. And it's not wrong that whoever didn't pass that on to them. In other words, everyone's trying to make it. Everyone's trying to survive. So if someone's grandparents, let's say, thought the best way for me to help my grandchildren is to assimilate them into the US culture and not teach them about their cultural foods, that was a gift of love. But it's okay to say, thank you for that gift of love, and I'd like to do something differently now. And I don't know if anyone else here is Jewish, but I'm Jewish, and we have this whole historical thing, right? Where it's like, your grandfather came to this country with nothing in his pocket but this silver menorah, and that's why we light it every year on Hanukkah, like that kind of thing, where it's like, if you don't do that, you are betraying thousands of years. And we try to encourage people to think about it as, what would your ancestors really say about this if you decided XYZ? Like, do you think they might say, wow, we sacrificed all that stuff so that our grandkids would have a choice? But it's something no one's ever really been taught. So if you decide that on Hanukkah, instead of eating fried potato pancakes, I decide to go to Trader Joe's and get hash browns because, heck, that's a whole lot easier than shredding my own potatoes. I don't feel like I'm betraying anyone. I feel like I'm keeping a tradition alive in a way that makes sense for me in 2026. But it's very hard to see those patterns and then to decide to change them when you feel like you're betraying someone else who sacrificed to get you here.
Right.
Absolutely.
Old stories.
And not one of us is not descended. All of us, everyone alive today, is descended from someone who went through the Great Depression, who went through a refugee status, who went through rationing during a war. There is no one here that doesn't have some of that. And so we carry that legacy. And it's not necessarily being utilized in a healthy way. I'm not saying we should waste food. I hate scenes in movies where there are food fights, because I think, how many times did they film that scene? How much food was wasted? I'm not saying we should be frivolous about things, but at the same time, do we have to suffer just because someone before us suffered? And we all grew up being told to clean our plates because someone didn't have enough to eat. Yeah. And so we were told we had to clean our plate. And I'm not saying we shouldn't work to maybe have less on our plate in the first place. But if your only choice is to eat food you're not hungry for or throw it away, honestly, I prefer if you throw it away, and I do not like wasting food. But if that is the only choice, that we have to make that choice. And some people cannot do it, and they will eat whatever is on their plate. And it's just such an unhealthy habit. But if you understand where it came from, you can sort of talk through it, I guess, with your own self, and even with people who are no longer living, which is a weird thought, I know, but that's what empty chair therapy is, right? Is having a conversation with someone who's not living and saying, thank you for the gifts of love. I am going to choose to do something different, but I'm going to keep your love, even though I'm not keeping that tradition.
So nice.
Okay, so let's make this practical, because
Okay.
insight without action can leave people feeling overwhelmed. So for
Okay.
women listening who are
Yeah.
thinking, okay, I see this
Yeah.
now,
Yes.
but where do I start? What are some simple, accessible first steps they can take to begin exploring their own food story?
Yes. So the first thing you can do is think about what was the last thing you did with food that you later regretted. So anyone here willing to share?
The last thing. So I'm sorry. Do you mean something like you had
Like
a
I'll share. I
okay?
regret that I didn't eat breakfast this morning because by the time I ate at noon, I was really overly hungry and I was worried I was going to get a migraine.
Oh,
Okay. So just as an example, something that you did with food that you're sort of like, I'm smarter than that, that kind of thing. And then your next step is to de-shame it and to say, yeah, I'm a smart person and I also skip breakfast. So there has to be another explanation besides I'm so stupid or I'm so
right.
irresponsible or I'm not a healthy eater. I'm a smart person, I'm a healthy eater, I'm very responsible. So what could have led to that? Um, I was not feeling well and my husband was out of the house, so I couldn't ask him for help. What could make it better if I go to the grocery store and get some things like yogurt that don't need preparation and I can just grab them out of the fridge. If I were to sort of let down my guard as far as not eating on a Zoom meeting and say to someone, look, this is my only opportunity to eat. I hope you don't mind. I'll turn off my audio so you don't have to hear me, eating this bowl of cereal. But it's really, if I had a different time to do it, I would do it, but it has to be now. And I hope you'll understand. Right. So looking at all the ways I could do something differently. So I think just think of that very first thing. And if you can't think of anything, then be alert for it tomorrow. What is something you do with food that you're like, this either isn't what I want to be doing, or I regret that I'm doing it, or I feel stupid for doing it. And assume that you are not a stupid person because you're very competent in life. What are the other explanations and how can you solve for those variables? And just let it be one thing, because the goal is to sort of break the pattern of the reason I did this is because I am blank, and instead think the reason I did this is because it's a pattern. That's it. Because the system set it up this way. And if this sounds like a lot, another sort of even smaller action item you can do is the next time you feel guilty, angry, disappointed after eating something, think about what other reason might I be angry, sad, or disappointed? Because this is like a dietitian secret. The way you feel after you eat is the way you felt before you ate. Because if you say pizza, I'm angry that I ate that pizza, I'm sorry. Pizza can't make you angry. Pizza is just molecules that you put inside your body. It's how you think about pizza that made you feel a certain way. So if I ate a piece of pizza and I felt great, and you ate a piece of pizza and you felt angry with yourself, that's not the pizza, right? It's the person. And so what is it that you might have been feeling angry about before, and detach it from the pizza? I'm not saying you should or shouldn't eat pizza. Maybe you don't want to eat pizza. That's fine. But if you blame the pizza and you just never eat pizza again, that's not actually solving the thing that you were angry about. And it's really deep, deep stuff. And maybe I sound kind of like a kook, and I'm okay with that.
Not at
But
all.
it's these very little changes in thinking. And I know what you're saying, like insight is overrated without behavior change, but the insight itself can be a huge aha moment and then crack it wide open for you to see other examples in your life. You could also think about what is something I'm doing that I don't know why I do,
Mhm.
and try to trace it back. Do you know the story about the ham, the newlywed who went to her in-laws' house for their first Thanksgiving, and they had a big ham, but half of the ham was cut off and it was in a different pan. And she said, why is the half the ham cut off? And the husband said, I don't know, ask my mom. And he says, Mom, why did you cut the half off the ham? And she says, I don't know, ask Granny. And they ask Granny, and Granny says, I don't know, ask Gigi. I do it because Gigi did it. And Gigi says, in 1912, when we had our first house, we only had one pan and it wouldn't fit a whole ham. So I cut the ham in half. And so now, 80 years later, everybody's still cutting the ham in half and nobody knows why.
Oh my
It's
God.
that kind of stuff. Like
Yeah.
and okay, I will add one more thing that is an important action item. Write it down, please write it down, because you cannot solve a problem with the same mind that created it. You have to have some objectivity to it. So write it down, whether it's in the Healing Your Inner Eater workbook, whether it's on a piece of paper, BevNap, doesn't matter. But write it down so that you don't have to keep it swirling in your head, so you can look at it later when you're in a different headspace. So you can even bring it to a friend and say, I wrote down these weird thoughts about eating because I heard this weird lady on a podcast. Does this make any sense to you? Because that's the other thing, is sometimes other people see things so clearly that we could not see in ourselves. And that's why we do lots of small group discussions, because it can really be eye-opening when you have to try to explain something to another person. A lot of times you don't even need their advice. You hit upon your own advice while you're saying it out loud.
Absolutely.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. You do that all the time, especially more on email. I'm writing something, asking a question, like, oh, never mind, I got it.
Okay, I have one last action that people can do, like while they're listening. Unless you're driving while you're listening, maybe don't do this. But this is how we open every Healing Your Inner Eater workshop. Someone important to you has been lying to you your whole life. It's you. And here's how I know. And we ask everyone to close one eye and look at your nose. So you have to kind of look in the opposite direction to see your nose. Close your other eye and look at your nose. Now open your eyes. You cannot see your nose. That is my best illustration of the fact that your mind is editing out things. Your mind is your perception, and it is not always real. So once you get that, the idea that you don't have to believe everything you think, which the first time I saw that, don't believe everything you think, I mean, I had to stop in my tracks and like parse it out. Don't believe everything you think. Like, it's so wild. But when you realize everything you experience is through perception, you suddenly have so much more power to change it, to understand it differently. We don't look and not see a nose and think our nose is gone. We know our nose is still there, but you literally cannot see it when both of your eyes are open. Like, that has to tell you something. And then we could go into a whole other hour of body image and how our perception of our bodies is so far off, et cetera, et cetera. But that for now we'll have to do.
Lorraine, did you have a comment before we wrap up?
Yeah. You look back and you say to yourself, okay, I recognize this pattern from my youth or from their youth. It's been carried on. But we don't have to blame our ancestors, or we don't have to point fingers, or we don't have to feel bad, or we don't have to feel victimized that somehow we were raised a particular way. I love that you left in, let's honor that time, because that time was most likely in love, for our protection, or out of necessity. Let's say we didn't have the greatest upbringing, and our relationship with food when we were younger might not have been really good, but out of necessity, out of survival, we did what we had to do. And so this reflecting back is not for blame or criticism or judgment or any of that stuff. It's for recognition. It's for awareness. It's for understanding the patterns, as you were saying. I love that you say that, because understanding ourselves. Awareness is not just a word we use, for wellness. We use it for a particular reason. Paying attention, getting to know ourselves, being curious about why we do what we do, where it came from, is essential to being able to do things differently and to make different choices. So I just wanted to make a note about that.
Yeah, thank you. You summarized it very concisely. Yes. And I will grant you that there are probably caregivers, including parents, and I just include everyone in caregivers, that probably had nefarious purposes. But I do think that I hope that most of the time, the mistakes that we feel like our caregivers made were hopefully with our best interests at heart, even though they didn't feel like it to us at the time, or even looking back may not have been in our best interest. But I mean, if you become a parent, you realize like, oh my God, my parents were only this age when they became a parent. Like, I don't know what you can sort of have some compassion, hopefully have some compassion, while at the same time being able to have your own life and do things your own way. But it's hard. I mean, that's not a big thing in our culture, to be able to say, I'm going to do things my own way. Sometimes people make it feel like, why are you doing this to me? Right. And it's like, no, I'm not doing this to you, parent. I just want to experiment and see how things could be different in my home, but it's hard. It's a balance. And I think a therapist or a coach or some kind of professional is often really helpful in those kind of situations, because again, like I'm thinking my first experience with the therapist, I needed her to say certain things to me, like, of course your dad loved you. I'm like, what do you mean, of course? But right, that kind of thing, and I don't know, I don't mean to belabor it, but just I really appreciate you saying that it's not about blaming ourselves. It's not about blaming someone else either. That's the key, is that there doesn't have to be blame. Like, why does someone have to be wrong? No one has to be a persecutor to make us the victim. It's just a matter of the situations we find ourselves in. Sometimes the skills that we were taught are no longer useful, and it can be hard to let them go because they bind us to someone that we love.
Yeah, the important thing is just learning that we can make our own choices now, and we have the power to do that. And a reflection back is just gathering data.
That's a great way to think about it. Yes.
Yeah, in order to do that.
Yes. Thank you.
Jessica, before we close, we always like to leave our listeners with something they can carry with them beyond this episode. If you could leave every woman listening with one empowering thought or tool, what would it be?
It would definitely be that you are not alone. Even if you feel alone, there are definitely other people going through the same thing as you. As unique as you are, there are other people going through the same thing as you. And even if you haven't found them yet, hang on, because someone is looking for you to validate their experience and embrace you. I just feel very, very certain that loneliness is a killer, and I never want anyone to feel like they're alone.
Wow.
So nice.
That message is incredibly freeing. And I know many women are going to want to explore your work further. So can you share where listeners can connect with you, find the Healing Your Inner Eater workbook, learn about your upcoming workshops?
Absolutely. So my umbrella website is jessicasetnick.com. That's where people go to, let's say, hire me as a speaker, that kind of thing. What I think would be most useful to people listening here is simply to go to healingyourinnereater.com. And I believe that you can download the workbook from that page, and that upcoming workshops are listed there. And I'd like to offer for anyone listening to use the discount code podcast, and we could put that in the show notes as well with the link.
Okay.
And that will bring the workbook cost down to $15. So that would be an easy way to kind of see more about what I'm about and maybe implement some of these activities in your own life.
Oh, very
Oh, wow.
nice.
That's awesome. So this conversation is such a reminder that healing often begins with awareness, understanding, not fixing. So understanding where our food stories come from, understanding why certain patterns feel so hard to change, understanding that struggling does not mean something is wrong with us. So, Jessica, thank you for bringing such compassion and clarity into this space. And to our listeners, if today stirred something in you, let that be an invitation, not a judgment. So, time for our weekly challenge. So, meet your inner eater with curiosity. This week, your challenge is not to change what you eat. Your challenge is to notice how you eat and why. And here's how you do it. Choose one meal or snack per day to pause before eating. No fixing, no judging, just noticing. Number 2, ask yourself 3 simple questions. What am I feeling right now? Why did I choose this food in this moment? And does this choice feel familiar from earlier in my life? Number 3, notice without correcting. You are gathering information, like Lorraine said, data, not issuing commands. Number 4, at least once this week, reflect on your early food story. Ask yourself, who shaped my... Ooh, that question wouldn't work because you said if you go straight to food, you won't know that. So if you ask who shaped my relationship with food, you might have to do the circle one first and figure out the people in your life. Another question, what message did I absorb about body's hunger or worth? And which of these messages do I want to keep and which no longer serve me? So at the end of each reflection, with one sentence of compassion, say something like, it makes sense that I learned this. I didn't make this up, I inherited it, or I am allowed to choose differently now. The goal is not to love your body. The goal is to understand your story. Because awareness creates choice, and choice is where real change begins. Tracy, do you have any closing thoughts you would like to share?
I loved this conversation. I just love you, Jessica. You are so much fun. The information you shared was so good, and I hope everybody really takes it to heart and listens and signs up for your your programs, because everybody has an inner healing, inner eater issue, I think, right? Especially women. I know men do too, but us women have been, just not brought up nicely that way. So thank you. I'm just going to say thank you very much, and I will stop talking. Okay. Thank you so much. Okay.
Lorraine, do you have final thoughts?
I want to thank you, Jessica. This is a wonderful conversation about food, about our inner eater, and the stories we carry. So, healing doesn't ask us to become someone new. And that's not what this is for. But it does ask us to understand who we've been, who we want to be, and supports us through that transition. So many of the patterns that we struggle with weren't created out of failure, but out of necessity or patterns. And when we see that clearly, we don't have to blame or fight ourselves anymore. We get to choose ourselves, our well-being, our serenity, and our power, instead of forcing. Thank you.
Nice.
Thank you, Jessica, for spending this time with us on the Happy Healthy Her podcast. If this episode resonated, please like, subscribe, and share it with a woman who needs this conversation. Remember, in a world where you can be anything, be happy, be healthy, and be kind.
Thanks for tuning in to the Happy Healthy Her podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to share it with anyone you think would benefit from the topics we're discussing. We'd love to hear from you. DM us with your thoughts, comments, or ideas for future episodes. And don't forget to check out the links in our bio if you'd like to connect with any of us or learn more about what we do. Until next time, remember, in a world where you can be anything, be kind, be happy, and be healthy.